Good morning. Smart, competent, powerful, impressive women, and maybe two men of taste and discernment in the room. Good morning, everyone. We are so glad to have you join us today on this Wednesday as we wrap up Women's History Month. I'm Susan Bysiewicz. I chair the Governor's Council on Women and Girls. And it's very important. It's an important objective of our council to work toward gender parity in Connecticut, especially in some of our largest companies in our state. And when we learned about Paradigm for Parity, we saw the value of collaborating with P4P to bring resources to many of our companies here in Connecticut that wanted to achieve the same goals of the council, but maybe didn't know how to go about it. So with us today, we have some Connecticut companies that are members of P4P who will share their experiences with using the P4P resources and share why it's important to strive for gender parity within their workplaces. Before we get to the panel, I want to acknowledge the presence of Beth Kent, who's the executive director of P4P, and Sandra Quince, who is the CEO of P4P. And you're going to hear more from Sandra during the press conference at the end of our panel. So let's get right to it. So today we have Carolyn Alessi, Regional Director of the Community Health and Regional Director of Community Health and Wellbeing, Trinity Health of New England. Does that all fit on a business card?
It does.
Excellent.
Very creatively.
All right. Tovahn Scott, Director, Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Raytheon Technologies, and Alecia Smith, Global Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Otis Elevator. So very, very impressive people that we have with us. So thank you to each of our panelists for joining us today. So here's the first question, and everyone's going to get the opportunity. What do you consider to be the benefits of leveling the playing field for women in the workforce for your company and in our country as a whole? So who would like to start?
I'll start.
Okay.
I think the benefits of leveling the playing field for women in workforce are numerous, especially within our company, in every company, but also to society. The research is clear. There's been research year over year that suggests that diversity drives better performance. And gender diversity, specifically, companies who focus on gender diversity and have better gender diversity outperform companies who don't, period.
Shareholders make more money.
Absolutely.
To get to the bottom line, right?
Bottom line. And that's profitability, that's innovation, that's collaboration. And culturally, organizations who have better gender diversity just feel better. There's a better sense of belonging. In addition to internally, what happens within organizations when gender diversity is a focus, externally, there's economic growth. When women get to participate in the workforce fully, they also get to participate in our economy fully. And I believe that there's research that's been done by McKinsey that says if we focus on gender parity, we have the opportunity to increase economic growth by $12 trillion. So I think that there's, the research is clear. Gender diversity and leveling the playing field, it's not just a benefit, it's imperative long-term for both companies and our economy locally.
That's why women's issues are economic issues.
Absolutely.
Yes, indeed.
Awesome. I think Tovahn was in my notes, you all, but she's correct that the research does point to all of those benefits. But I just like to say it's good common sense, right? When half of the population is female, yet our organizations don't reflect that, we have an opportunity. When we think about 50% of the America, even the world, period, that it being 50%, and those individuals not having an opportunity to thrive, those individuals not having the chance to equitable opportunity and access, we should all think about that and the future coming behind us and making sure those individuals have that opportunity. It's important.
I
Carolyn.
think they actually answer that question most adequately, so I will yield to the next question.
Excellent. Well, good, because we have a lot. All right. So P4P has a 5-point action plan that has a number of steps that companies can take, because that is the whole point. How do you get, what's the roadmap? How do you get there? So the roadmap is for achieving parity by 2030. So, or within 15 years of whenever you start. So when you look at the plan, I'm going to ask if there's one action that you think is most critical to ensuring that we get to parity. You want to start with that, Carolyn?
I absolutely will. Thank you. So I think they're all very critical, but I think as you look at the 5-point action plan, I think the last one, the 5th one, is probably the most undervalued and underutilized action plan. And it is the identify women of potential and give them sponsors as well as mentors. I think particularly with women of color, this is an area where we are not great at seeking out. And it's important if we want to actually advance in senior leadership roles, we really do need that sponsor, particularly their male sponsors who can advocate for us, who can pave a way for us to be able to be in those senior leadership roles. And that is definitely an area that's underutilized. And I think that we need to be able to, as organizations, foster an environment where that is a norm in the culture. I know at Trinity Health, we have both a mentorship program that's across the country called Emerge, and we also have a strategic leadership program that is focused on succession planning. And last year, the executive leadership at Trinity Health New England decided to create a metric for our Emerge program, which is our mentoring program. And that is to ensure that there is diversity in the next cohort. And we've achieved that by having 50% of diverse colleagues in attendance of this cohort that's coming up in May. And that's huge. And this is across the country. And so I think for many organizations, especially if you're large, global, and have a national footprint, the only way you're going to get visibility is to be able to have a sponsor and have mentors who can open doors for you.
Great. Ladies, you want to add?
Yeah, sure. So at Otis, we've too, as you mentioned, Carolyn, have embraced the full 5-point plan, but the one that we've seen the most results from so far is the first pillar, which is around acknowledging unconscious bias. And I know many of our organizations have focused on that, but we see that as most valuable because that's the root of decision making. And our unconscious bias typically can get in the way of how we think about talent, how we progress talent, how we advance talent, and certainly that impacts women. And so we've devoted resources, time, energy, and finances to making sure our organization understands that we all have inherent bias and that we need to acknowledge it, label it, and mitigate it as much as possible as we make those talent decisions.
I'll just add one other pillar, and that's actually attract. And I went back and forth between attract and advance, but what we recognize, especially in the aerospace and defense industry, is that we have to build the pipeline. And so for us, the attracting of the talent is critical. When we joined P4P, we had a strategic pillar to specifically deal with this. And one thing we've done is partner with Girls Who Code. And we've made a huge investment in that space in order to build the pipeline. And we're aiming to build the largest female pipeline for engineering and technology in the world. And so we think that in order to get to the advancement and the sponsorship, we have to be able to attract that talent. And so I think that the attraction piece is critical. It's critical.
Great. So Alecia, can you share a specific example of how a P4P initiative has impacted progress in your organization and also for you personally?
Sure, absolutely. So what I appreciate most about Paradigm for Parity is all the tools and strategies that they provide are easily adoptable, right? The toolkit, the action plan is very user-friendly. And so we've adopted several of those in our organization, but one in particular that we focused on is really around leadership development for women. And so we have worked with strategic partners to establish development programs specifically for women. And we've started to see the ROI on that already. We've seen talent movement. So we've seen progression, advancement. We've also seen lateral moves, and we've seen better colleague engagement. And we will have more of those results in our upcoming ESG report, shameless plug, that's coming out next week, and around those metrics. And so I'm really excited about that because, again, we're laser focused on making sure that we reach gender parity by 2030, which for us is that our executive population will include 50% women by 2030, and we're well on our way to that. I personally have benefited from the leadership development programs. I just went through one program in particular for the last year, and it was truly valuable. And out of that, I also received a sponsor. So talking about, back to Carolyn and Tovahn's point about sponsorship is critical. And that sponsor I'm actually going to see today because she lives in Connecticut. So I'm excited about that. And she's in the business. And so that's given me an opportunity to learn more about that. And then last, I would say that we've invested in our employee resource groups. And we have 9 that are focused specifically on women around the world. And they're all making a difference, of course, in our culture and driving inclusive culture, and certainly in the communities in which we live and work. So
I just want to say that you both have talked about pipeline. So right now in our colleges and universities and in our graduate school programs, you have 50% women. Yet when you look at who's working at our companies in mid-level management positions, you only see 35% women, right? So this is why this initiative is so critical. So we're going to ask Tovahn. Raytheon has been a longtime member of P4P. So how would you say that your partnership with P4P might differ from other organizations that you work with who are also doing work on gender parity?
Yeah, so we have been a long time member, and we're grateful for the partnership with Paradigm for Parity, and to be able to just work with an organization whose mission is so closely aligned to our DE&I aspirations. I personally believe that one of the things that makes our partnership so special with P4P is that 5-point action plan that we talked about just a few minutes ago. That action plan is truly a roadmap that could be used to drive transformation within your organizations, to start to see real, tangible progress when it comes to gender parity. We have tapped into that 5-point action plan multiple times to really go and create and develop strategic initiatives, both internally and externally, that help propel this progress. And so a couple of, just one real quick, is our Re-Empower program. So back to the attraction piece being so important. And we have kicked off a re-empowerment program since being partners with Paradigm for Parity, leveraging that partnership to really go and focus on experienced professionals who are relaunching their career after being out of the workforce for 2 or more years, and creating an opportunity for them to develop and build networks and gain mentorships in order to go into full-time or part-time jobs within Raytheon. We're proud of that program. We have a 100% graduation rate, but that is a direct correlation to partnering with companies like P4P, and specifically to that 5-point action plan that they provide as a roadmap for us.
Great. Thank you so much. So Carolyn, you are with Trinity. They are a newer organization coming to the P4P coalition. They joined last year during Women's History Month. Can you share how your company got started and how the P4P partnership has evolved and what progress you're seeing?
Yeah, so we, as you mentioned, we did join last year, and it was an incredible opportunity for us to really demonstrate our commitment to elevating women in and advancing them. And so this partnership came along as a result, really because of you, Lieutenant Governor. I think I want to acknowledge that because you are a huge proponent of companies really advancing women in STEM and also gender pay parity. And so when you sent our CEO a note saying, hey, you know, we'd like you to consider Paradigm for Parity, it kind of was you know, a little bit of, unfortunately, we had a little bit of a lag time in response, but because I knew about the the initiative through our joint efforts with Million Women Mentors Connecticut, and I'm state leader for that, where we encourage women to pursue and persist in STEM. I found out that she had reached out to our CEO, so I was like, oh, let me just send them a little note. And hey, how are we doing with this? Can we, make some movement? And sure enough, we did sign the pledge, and that resulted in us becoming the first healthcare system to join Paradigm for
Women getting it done. Love
Yeah,
it. Love
absolutely.
it.
It's all about influence. And so since then, it's been an amazing journey. We were able to really partner with Paradigm for Parity. They became a thought partner to us, especially looking at our DE&I and HR strategies and helping us to understand where some of our gaps are, where they can help fill some of the ways that we can augment the programs that we have. And they've really been a great resource for us. And so we look forward to continuing our journey with them. And we continue to look forward to seeing how we can partner in other ways, especially with the network that we have with Paradigm for Parity.
And I'll just say that one of the great things about getting Trinity Healthcare to join, then it was easy to get Hartford and Yale Health to be part of it. A little good peer pressure, right?
Right.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So anybody else want to weigh in on that question? No, we're good. Okay. Alecia, I understand that P4P members participate in annual metrics. And that is a survey that collects data on attraction, retention, advancement, and sponsorship of employees by gender and ethnicity. And the results are anonymous and they're aggregated so that there are benchmarks. So how does Otis leverage the results of the survey, and why is this important?
Yes, thank you, Lieutenant Governor, for the question. So at Otis, we anticipate the survey every year. It gives us an opportunity to, of course, evaluate our progress year over year, but more importantly, it gives us an opportunity to look at how we're doing across industries. And that's very important for us. It's our guidepost to prioritize and strategically look at what are the priorities that we're going to tackle from a D&I perspective at Otis. So we definitely leverage the results. We do review it every year with our senior HR leadership team. Our CPO, our Chief People Officer, expects that review and wants to know how are we working internally within our organizations across all the facets of diversity. So not only how does it affect D&I within HR, but also supplier diversity. It looks at what you're doing from a benefit standpoint, et cetera. So we're excited about the survey. It's definitely helpful. And every year we look forward to doing it.
Excellent. Thank you. So Tovahn, based on all the tools that you've accessed from P4P, what do you think remains one of the most valuable tools that allows Raytheon to continue on this journey toward gender parity? Is there one thing that stands out?
Yeah, I'll say that there's no shortage of tools when you're partnering with Paradigm for Parity. So I'll just start with that. To me, the most invaluable has been the data, the research, the case studies that we have access to through our partnerships. For us, you have to name a thing, and if you're going to address it. And so getting to that root cause, understanding where those gaps exist, and then thinking strategically about how we close that gap has been essential in some of the programs we've initiated. We couldn't have done that without some of that research, without some of those insights, and that partnership with P4P in that way. So to me, the research, the numerous case studies and ability to benchmark through that process has been critical and invaluable to our company.
Great. Carolyn, what advice would you give to companies that are looking at P4P? What things do you think that they ought to look at if they're just starting out?
I think that we have to remember it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, so there is a journey to getting to where we need to be. And it takes intentional effort. I think that the CEO can sign the pledge, but he's not or she's not going to be the one to champion it. And so it's really important that once your CEO signs the pledge that you own this relationship with P4P. And we've done that in a way that I feel is a shared ownership. We've created a working group. So our Senior Vice President of Government Relations was like, you know what, let's create a working group after we signed this pledge, because we need to have a diverse group of multidisciplinary leaders at the table, really looking at our organization. And so we've engaged our regional vice president of communications and marketing, our regional director for DE&I, and myself, as well as our regional vice president for strategic planning and development. And so with this cross-functional group, along with our chief nursing officer, we can really see how we can move the needle on gender parity. And so I think if you think about considering paradigm for parity, I think this is probably the best way to really continue to move this initiative along. Otherwise, it'll just fall at the wayside, and we don't want to do that.
Great. So here's the final question, and we're going to ask each of you this question. What can the government of the state of Connecticut do to help more companies such as yours reach their goals toward gender parity? You want to start?
Sure, absolutely. So I think not only just Connecticut, but I think many of our states can support the efforts of D&I by having this conversation, to be honest, right? And showing the society that this is important, that we want to reach gender parity within our organizations, that there are companies that are committed to the work and that it's important. Also, the way that government can help is ensuring that we continue to have diversity, equity, and inclusion training programs. There are current states that are potentially looking at not having that, and so we want to make sure that we're continuing to support the organizations in helping everyone become aware of the opportunities that we have with gender parity. And then lastly, I would say is continuing to support programming that allows girls to see the opportunities that are in front of them, that they are able to do anything that they put their mind to, whether it's STEM, whether it's education and government, what have you, that they can do it and continue to have those type of programs.
Very good.
I agree. The conversation is important. And I want to thank you, Lieutenant Governor Bysiewicz, for your leadership in this area. I think the one thing I'd like to see the Connecticut government continue to do is the work through the Governor's Council for Women and Girls, continuing to be bold with the bills that you're putting forward to help break down those barriers that exist around gender parity in the state of Connecticut. You know, I'll specifically call out Bill 881, I believe it is, around career development, which offers affordable transportation to workforce training and other workforce development opportunities in education. I think that's a game changer. It's progressive, and it's the right strategic steps to take to break down those systemic barriers that women are facing as they're trying to enter into the workforce. So I'm just looking forward to more progressive and enhanced bills coming out of that council. And again, I appreciate the work that you're already focused on there.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Thank you. I agree with Tovahn, absolutely. I think I'm very proud to live in Connecticut. I think we've done a lot to remove barriers and we'll continue to do more to remove barriers for women to advance and for companies to thrive in the workforce. And so one of, as you mentioned, the bill, and I know that about 2 years ago, the state of Connecticut passed a bill around pay parity. And that was a huge win for us, because it allows for women like us to know what the range is for pay, which was always something that was a mystery. And so I think that helps open up doors for women to be able to know what their worth, to be able to know what value there is, and for companies to really have equity in their pay for women. And so that's one area. And I think the other is, you know, a lot of women struggle with the balance of home and their professional career, particularly around childcare. And I think that is something that is right now a hot topic in Connecticut. A lot of women, especially during COVID, left the workforce because of child and family imbalance. And that is an area where we're going to continue to see the leaky pipeline if we don't figure out how to support women who have families and also want to advance their careers. So I think Connecticut is on its way to doing that. So I'm very proud to be a part of the state.
Thank you for all of those comments, I'll just talk about a few things because I make sure this is on the governor's agenda every day. And one is, I think that as state government leaders, we have to be role models for the private sector, and leaders in government can help leaders in business and vice versa by modeling what excellent leadership looks like. So we have 50% of our cabinet secretaries or commissioners that are highly skilled, very competent women. And a third of our commissioners are very talented, amazing people of color who lead our state agencies. And we are always looking for diverse leaders. And I think that we don't have shareholders, we have taxpayers, we have voters, right? So what's the measure of leadership? Well, during COVID, we had all of these diverse leaders, whether it was in public health, whether it was in social services, transportation, helping us lead and making sure that equity was something that was first and foremost, that we were looking at how to help, especially vulnerable parts of our state, get through it. And I think it's one of the reasons why we did so well during COVID, because we had a diverse, smart people at the table helping us lead. And this is something that we take really seriously. I used to sit in this building as a state legislator in a room like this in our Judiciary Committee, and it would not be uncommon to see a whole class of people who'd been nominated for judges that were all white men come before our committee to be questioned and to have a public hearing about their qualifications. And so now the governor and I make sure that our classes of judges are half women, half people of color, because we have such a long way to go to address this institutional inequity that we've had for, I'll just say, centuries. So, and we do the same with our state boards and commissions. There are 400 of them, and these are volunteer positions. And unfortunately, we've had over the years very few women and very few people of color involved in helping state government make policy on a volunteer basis. The Secretary of the State publishes a report every 2 years. So we are really making it our mission to make sure that we appoint very diverse people to those boards and commissions. Carolyn mentioned pay equity. This is something that is very important to us. So we've been big supporters of pay equity. And if you look at our state employees, they are paid dollar for dollar. Women are paid dollar for dollar what men make. Why is that? Because we have labor unions that are there making sure that women are paid dollar for dollar. And so government actually does better than the private sector in terms of pay equity. We're not perfect. There are still things that we need to do to address that issue, but the government sector is better at paying people what they should be making than the private sector. Also, I will say that if we want to achieve pay equity, and this is why I'm glad we have Otis and Raytheon and Trinity here, because all these are STEM fields, right? Right now, only 25% of positions in STEM are held by women. And if we want to have equal pay, then we need to have it 50-50, because STEM jobs are the best and the highest paying. So we need more women engineers, women doctors, in order to get to that goal. And I think Carolyn also talked about childcare. Childcare is literally the infrastructure of our economy, and we can't be productive as an economy. We can't grow jobs unless we have women fully participating in the workforce. And I'll just say, in World War II, the government solved this problem really quickly because we had 16 million men that were going to help in the war effort, and we needed people in our factories producing military equipment, and the government had free daycare so that women could go to work. So our military right now has free daycare. So I'm telling you, it is not impossible. And because we've seen it, we've, our forebears and foremothers lived it. And I literally had an Aunt Rose who worked at Pratt and Whitney during World War II, making propellers. So I know that this is possible. And that's why the governor and I have charged Beth Bai, who leads our Office of Early Childhood. And by the way, a lot of states don't even have one of those. So it shows our commitment. And we just put together a 10-year committee to figure out how we're going to make sure that everyone has access to affordable and high quality early childhood education for our kids. And it's going to be a combination of incentives to employers who either build their own child care centers, like the one that we visited at Boehringer Ingelheim, one of our partners. For years, they've had an on-site child care center that is just beautiful. There's a waiting list to get your child into it, or whether it's companies that recognize that it's important to subsidize childcare for their employees, or whether we as a state are going to invest in that initiative, because that's going to be really important to make sure that women are participating fully. And here's another reason why I know it is having a universally available childcare is not impossible, because if you go to Quebec, you will see that their families pay $50 a week for their children to be in early childhood programs, and families from all backgrounds have their kids participating, which is always the best. And the Canadian economy is extremely productive because more women are out in the workforce. So thank you for bringing up the childcare component, because that's really, really important. So that brings us to the end of our sort of formal discussion, but we're going to open up the floor to some questions. So I don't know, Christine, do we have any, Madam General Counsel, from anybody that's watching, or we'll take any questions here?
Yeah, so we have about over 90 people, or about 90 people on Zoom. And so we do have questions coming in. One question we have is, how do you engage middle level management, i.e. supervisors, middle managers, in supporting and actively participating in this effort so that individuals are positively impacted by the program, et cetera, that leaders strive to implement?
Ooh, Alecia, Carolyn, who wants to, I can see they're all chomping at the bit to go
Well,
for that
this
one.
is what we all think about at night, right? Truly, because it is typically middle management that we have to work with. And so what I would say to that is, getting them involved, there's a couple of ways. One is through what we call our performance management process, and holding our leaders accountable to ensuring that they are doing something around D&I, right? And that could look at joining any employee resource group, encouraging their colleagues to join, their direct reports to join. That could look like, of course, diverse slates and diverse interview panels, and them holding themselves accountable to reaching that. And all of that we measure in our system. So I think you have to engage them in the conversation, engage them in the work, make it exciting. And again, when you tie it to the performance, it definitely makes a difference.
Yeah, I would chime in that we have to help them be accessible to these opportunities. Middle managers tend to get bogged down, and particularly in healthcare, we're so short-staffed, and so oftentimes they're not freed up to do or participate in any programs that are offered by the organization, nor do they know about them. So I think as leaders, we have to do a better job informing our middle managers of the opportunities that they have to advance or to get involved, but then also to encourage them and free them up to even be a part of colleague resource groups. And that's really where they're going to be able to build their network. They're going to be able to learn from their peers and also get exposure to leaders. And so I think that's really important. I think that's a particular workforce that we really need to have more emphasis and focus on.
Agreed with both comments. And I just would add that to the point of getting involved in resource groups. DE&I sometimes the biggest impact happens in the grassroots efforts. And so helping them to connect with things like our employee resource groups, helping them to connect with the numerous resources that exist out there, and then also taking a more integrated approach to DE&I in general, and that it cannot be a siloed activity or initiative. It has to be integrated in all of our talent processes. And so helping to build those things into the process so that they come naturally, they're easily accessible, and they're just part of the day-to-day business DNA, I think is important as well.
Madam General Counsel, next question.
So there's a program out there called Untapped Potential that tries to help women re-enter the workforce. Are you aware of that, this program? Are you aware of that? And is there a way to back that program or support it?
So I think you have just talked about a similar program. Do you want to start with that?
Sure. I'm not familiar with the Untapped program. However, I agree. I think that it's a phenomenal opportunity to help women, especially, but not just women, re-enter the workforce after being out for any period of time because of different reasons. We know most of the time, a lot of that has to do with taking care of families and being at home. And so I think the investment should be made there. We personally have built our own Re-Empower program to do that. And again, it's been wildly successful. So I agree with the comment. If we could figure out ways to support that type of program, I think it would be phenomenal.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I know Candace Friedenberg well, and Untapped Potential is an amazing organization. They do help skill up women who've been out of the workforce for some period of time or have switched careers and need to be skilled up. And so it's very similar to what Raytheon has for Re-Empower. But I wish that I had the Untapped Potential when I took a break from my professional career to stay home with my children, because oftentimes when you take a break and you're out of the workforce for 4, 5, 6, 7 years, you have to start at the bottom again. And companies don't appreciate the work that you've done at home in managing your own enterprise at home, and how that can translate into a workforce skills. And so that's what Untapped Potential does. And I believe Re-Empower does the same thing, but I think it's very critical for women who opt out of the workforce for personal reasons to be able to have those types of resources.
And I'll say this, that I was just at a national lieutenant governor meeting, and every state is facing what every large company is facing. And that's that we need people here in Connecticut, just like every industry does, manufacturing, healthcare, and a lieutenant governor talked about her state's returnship program. And that was to target women, but also men who, for whatever reason, have been out of the workforce for 2 years or more. And it could be because of COVID. It could be because they took a break for their families, but whatever. This has been fabulously successful to get people to work for that particular state. That was Utah that created this returnship program. I thought it was brilliant, and I will be suggesting to the governor and our Department of Administrative Services that we have the same thing, because the government, just like private companies, can benefit from people who've been out of the workforce for a little while coming back in. Christine?
So P4P CEO is an incredible leader from Bank of America. How do the panelists envision other corporations to review such creative leadership opportunities? So I don't know if many of you know, I think Sandra is being borrowed from Bank of America to lead P4P.
Okay.
So how does other corporations kind of review that creative?
Carolyn, you
leadership?
want to?
I just really am excited about what Bank of America has done in loaning out Sandra to P4P. I think it's a way for leaders who have high potential to be able to have a different level of exposure and opportunity for growth in their leadership, taking on a nonprofit organization and being the head of that. But also it takes the burden off of the nonprofit organization to have to fund a particular person. So it really is a win-win. They get the talent and the knowledge of a senior leader leading their organization, and the organization gets to be able to have, an individual lead it. And I think companies really need to think outside the box. If there aren't opportunities for women to move into higher level roles, can they do something like Bank of America and do a stretch assignment? I think it's a brilliant idea.
It's like a CEO internship, right? Christine?
So another question is, when we mentioned pay equity, is there transparency on how it's being reported or how we're measuring pay equity?
Well, there's transparency at the state level because you can Google anybody's salary. Thank you to our state controller's office, right? I actually thought this was just the best. I remember when Hillary Clinton was doing a town hall meeting, and a little girl asked her if she ran for president, if she would get paid the same thing that men presidents made for a salary, which I thought was great. And the answer is absolutely yes, because there are specified salaries if you are a legislator or the lieutenant governor, but everybody in state government has their salary on the internet. So maybe we can have the private sector talk about that.
I don't know that we've been that progressive yet. Not quite. But what I will say is that at least at Otis, we have taken the liberty to do a pay equity study. We do that every year with external organization, and we talk about that again in our ESG report. But one of the things that we focus on is if there is inequity, we address it. And I'm really proud of our organization for doing that, and for having the transparent conversation with our colleagues about that where appropriate.
Agreed. We do a very similar process at Raytheon Technologies. We do have some internal transparency through pay ranges, but we're definitely not as transparent as being able to pull up individual salaries. And I think there's a lot of complications to how that process has to be rolled out. I think we're interested in getting better. And so I think that's the important piece. But to your point, we do an assessment annually, and we do make adjustments annually because we are committed to this process fully. This is not lip service for us. Like, this is mission critical.
All right. I'm not sure if Otis has its own independent 5-point action plan, but the question is, Otis has a 5-point action plan to achieve gender parity. What actions do you need business leaders to take for our organization to achieve our gender equity and DEI goals?
Awesome. That sounds like that's one from Otis. Well, thank you for being here. So we of course adopted the 5-point plan from Paradigm for Parity. So many of the tactics that we're leveraging are from that plan. But what we need from leaders is to engage in the process. We need you to be accountable. We need you to find what makes the most sense in your organization. And what I love about Paradigm for Parity tools is the first step is to understand your data. And so as a leader, it is imperative that you understand, what does the diversity makeup look like within your organization? Where do you have opportunity? And really challenge yourself You don't need us to give you a directive. You can take the initiative to challenge yourself to do better in that space where possible. And then I would say, again, the other one is to, once you understand your data, you put actions in place, and then you, of course, communicate that to the organization so that you can have others come along with you. I think the other piece of this is that, again, we talked about it, all of us, employee resource group, colleague resource groups, business resource groups, right? There are many names for them. It is imperative that you are involved, that you are a sponsor where appropriate, that you are engaging in the work, because this is work that our colleagues are doing outside of their full-time job because they're so passionate about making a difference with inclusive culture and driving equity. So there are many ways that you can get involved. And if you want to talk about that more, you can certainly reach out to me personally.
That sounds like an opportunity. If anybody saw that, okay, excellent. Go ahead.
All right, last question on Zoom. What professional organizations would the panelists recommend attendees consider that have potentially helped the panelists along their journeys?
I think we had a partial answer to that, but maybe Raytheon or Trinity, you want to?
Yeah, there's a number of organizations. One, P4P, right? I think it's been critical on our journey, and maybe a little biased because we're here talking about P4P, but definitely phenomenal and hands down has been critical in our journey. Organizations like Catalyst is another organization that is highly, impactful in this DE&I space and has a ton of resources. I've grown a ton in general from just participating in conversations in that space. And last, for women out there who are seeking to continue their own growth and think about gender parity individually, Fairy God Boss is another spectacular organization with a ton of resources.
Fairy God Boss.
Yes, it's an amazing organization. So I'll offer that one up to you as well if you're not familiar with it, to go and engage individually or collectively as an organization, which we also do.
It's interesting. When I talk about Rosa DeLauro, who is one of the top leaders of the Appropriations Committee in Congress. I call her the fairy godmother of federal funding, and I had no idea there was a fairy god boss. I need one of those. No worries, Governor Lamont. Did you want to? Okay. My goodness, I will say this. I think all of us, no matter where we are in our professional journeys, are role models for others. So we always have to remember that. And I will say, for someone who's been in state government and also been in the private sector, when I was in state government as a legislator and secretary of the state, and now as lieutenant governor, we always had high school and college student interns. And some of my very best people that I have hired in the Secretary of the State's office, in my legislative office, and now lieutenant governor's office have been interns. And you have the opportunity to see them in action, to see how passionate they are, to observe how they interact with people, and they have the same opportunity to watch what a leader does every day. And never underestimate the power that you have, no matter where you are. You're always a role model for others. And I just encourage everybody who's watching to make sure that you're always looking out for the next generation, because they're right there. They're right there.
All right, so we're going to just set up real quickly for the press conference. So just give us like 2 minutes.
All right, so ladies, if you want to kind of stand and join so everyone can see this powerful panel of female leaders. All right, look at that. Fabulous. Okay. Wonderful. Well, good morning and thank you so much for joining us. We've had robust participation via Zoom. So thank you everyone for helping us to celebrate Women's History Month and recognize and acknowledge the contributions that women have made to our state, our country, and the world. We celebrate to reaffirm our commitment to advance equality for women in all aspects of society and to assess how far we've come over the past year. Earlier this month, I wrote an op-ed with Paradigm for Parity, highlighting that although we've made some strides together in gender parity, we still have a very long way to go, since only 9% of the Fortune 500 CEOs are women and less than 1% are people of color. So, so much more to do together. The definition of parity is the state or condition of being equal, especially regarding status or pay. So it's not enough to have gender diversity in a workforce if there's no parity, such that women have the same value, power, rank, and salaries as their male equivalents. And although women are making up more than 50% of university and higher education students, they continue to hold only 35% of top management positions. And as I mentioned, less than 9% of the leadership positions at our Fortune 500 companies. And we are fortunate here in Connecticut to have some of those very large companies within our borders. The numbers are even more bleak when we consider women of color, who make up less than 1% of Fortune 500 CEOs. We are making some progress when it comes to the number of women on boards of directors. That's increased quicker than the number of CEOs. Right now, there are approximately 28% women on corporate boards of Fortune 500 companies. But we still see adequate representation within our companies. And when we see that lack of representation, there's a significant number of voices that are not represented, are not heard, and you are leaving shareholder remuneration on the table if you don't have diverse leaders in your company. So at this time, it is my great pleasure to invite Sandra Quince, the CEO, Paradigm for Parity, to share a few words.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. So I want to thank you. I also want to thank Otis. I want to thank Raytheon, and I want to thank Trinity Health of New England for the wonderful panel discussion that they hosted. I was back there just cheering, and I wanted to at one point stand up and start clapping because the information that you shared was so wonderful and critical for not only for your organizations, but for other organizations to hear as well. And I want to thank the work that the state of Connecticut is doing to ensure that you are a gender-friendly state. In fact, I was thinking to myself, maybe my husband and I should move to Connecticut. That's right.
Just saying.
That's right. Absolutely. So, so thank you so much for doing that. And this is why it's so critical for organizations and government and individuals to partner and to do the work that we need to do to ensure gender parity. I don't know if you all understand the criticality of this work, and if you understand that we are 137 years from parity, and that is absolutely ridiculous. So why is it important that Paradigm for Parity continues on the work that we do? Well, there are three areas that I want to highlight. Number one, it takes action, and we're actionable. And so you heard a lot about our 5-point action plan. And of that 5-point action plan, I want to point out 2 areas that are critically important. Number one, we have to eliminate and we have to be able to mitigate bias in the workplace. It is the basis of which we make decisions. And then number 2, that's a critical part of that 5-point action plan is sponsorship. Women need sponsorship. Ethnically underrepresented talent need sponsorship in order to make it up and through to the C-suites of their organizations. The other thing is intentionality. Companies have to be intentional. So besides measuring progress, which you heard about, the way that we measure progress and hold our companies accountable for that progress, we also help others see and experience. So the individual woman coming and others and allies coming to experience some of our programs, like our Profit and Loss Leadership Accelerator program. It is important that we help women to see themselves in operational roles besides support function roles in organizations. Also, our Multicultural Women's Conference and Summit that we put on every year. And last but not least, highlighting women who are doing great work in the workforce and workplace and through our Women on the Rise. Third but not least, our communal power. So how are we a catalyst for progress? Well, we engage those leaders, our C-suite and CEO leaders, to make gender parity a key pillar, and not just a pillar within their diversity, equity, and inclusion goals, but integrated into their business strategy, which is critically important as well. So we challenge the companies that are not members of Paradigm for Parity to join us in ensuring that we're achieving gender parity. And if anyone's watching and you don't represent the state of Connecticut, I challenge your state to get involved, to get engaged, and to ensure that gender parity, women and girls, is a strategy for your state. Thank you.
Right. Sandra, thank you so much for your leadership of Paradigm for Parity and for being such a strong advocate about how companies can achieve gender parity by using the resources and the coalition that you have created with your team. I now would like to invite Raytheon Technologies to provide some brief remarks.
Good morning. Again, I'm Tovahn Scott. I'm one of the Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion leaders at Raytheon Technologies. And on behalf of Raytheon, I just want to take a moment to thank the Lieutenant Governor and to thank Sandra and Paradigm for Parity for hosting this Women's History Month event and really bringing light to this very important topic. For us, it is very near and dear to our heart and truly aligned with the work that we're doing at Raytheon to be better as an organization and to create more inclusive work environments. I'm proud to stand up here with my fellow panelists who represent Connecticut-based business and their leadership. And I'm proud to look around the room and see on the audience that see in the Zoom that we have a number of members and decision makers here participating and reaffirming their steadfast commitment to gender parity, not just in the state of Connecticut, but in your organizations, which are probably global. And so it's very impressive. I just want to thank you once again for your leadership in this space. And I'm just so excited to have been able to participate in this event.
Great, thank you so much. And now I'm going to invite Otis Elevator to make a few comments. Alecia.
Yes, thank you so much, Lieutenant Governor and Sandra, who is also my mentor, you all. She is amazing. So thank you so much for this opportunity to share on behalf of Otis and to be on this panel. For us, reaching gender parity is not just about changing policy. It's not just a nice gesture, but it is imperative for us at Otis to reach that, because I'm gonna read my statement here. To have critical conversations on gender parity during Women's History Month is critical. For us at Otis, reaching parity, again, is not just about changing policy, but it's about driving change structurally in our processes and shifting the hearts and minds of our colleagues to build a better future for where all have equal access and opportunity. I am so proud of the work that we're doing at Otis, yet recognize that we are not done. We're putting a comma where a period used to be. And P4P helps us with all the tools, the action plans, and the strategies to make sure that we create a better place that we're proud of working for. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And finally, Carolyn Alessi from Trinity Healthcare.
Good morning. Thank you. My name is Carolyn Alessi, and I'm Regional Director for Community Health and Wellbeing at St. Francis Hospital, which is part of Trinity Health of New England. Lieutenant Governor, we want to thank you for your longstanding support of our healthcare system and ensuring that you continue to champion gender equity across the state. When we became a Paradigm for Parity member, we were eager to join, and we are proud to partner with the coalition to continue our work to address the gender imbalance prevalent in corporate leadership positions and to ensure women of all races, cultures, and backgrounds can succeed and thrive in the workplace. During our first year as a Paradigm for Parity Coalition member, P4P has been an incredible thought partner and resource for us to ensure success in achieving our goal of gender parity by 2030. We already had many systems in place, and however, we continue to see areas where we can improve to ensure we continue to recruit and retain talent within our healthcare system. We've already hit a major milestone, which I'm really proud to share, is that having 50% of our executive leadership represented by women who've been promoted within our organization as of last year. And we have our new CEO, Montez Carter, who's in full support of our partnership with P4P and has been an advocate in advancing women into leadership roles. I'm proud to be part of an organization and this coalition that demonstrates that it's not enough to just talk the talk, but we must walk the walk to ensure change. Thank you for now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. What an incredible, impressive group of women. One more time, thank you so much for being part of this great conversation. And we will answer any questions that our press partners might have. All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. And thank you, ladies, for your leadership. We are very, very grateful. Right. Okay. So can we get a